and that politicians use to try and gauge the system that they work in and try and play around those rules. What has power is the will of the people and their means to kind of fight back against the state, right? And voting in many ways is somewhat representative of that. I think Emma Goldman said it best when she said if voting changed anything, they wouldn't let you do it. And I think that's kind of true. That being said, voting is a good system towards trying to reduce some violence. And I think that we can use voting if we use voting and combined with a lot of other things as a means of taking away power from the state. In terms of, is our democracy broken? Well, if you're talking about America, that's probably it was broken from the moment it was instituted because democracy is bad. But also it's probably been broken from what the founding fathers envisioned. And we've had, kind of a proto-fascist state since the end of the Civil War and during the Civil War. And it's kind of been broken since then. And I'm not sure if we can fix it with voting alone. I don't think it would be preferable to do so.
Awesome. Prime?
Yes. So I think that when it comes to our institutions, I thought this question was problematic as well, right? One, I think that if it's just down to voting, well, yeah, we have an option, a mechanism within our society to make changes. I agree with Destiny there that you have to engage with the system, right? Like use the tools that you have available. And of those tools, I think we do have some robust tools that can make changes if change is what you want. Right. So I think the ability is there. However, I think that everything around that ability, right? The public's access to the vote, right? The public's access to our institutions, all those things are damaged, right? Even the public's understanding of what the institutions even do, right? And I think some of that is even purposeful, that people don't even know how the best way to engage, right? You could say simply vote, sure, okay, but then I do vote, and then nothing seems to change, and I don't see results in my life, and things maybe seem to get worse, and I think it's an extremely discouraging process. I think it's vote, it's organize, but it's also have an understanding of what these institutions are and how to either bend them to your will or have a plan to have some sort of institutional reform. So I'll leave it there.
Awesome. Okay. And Soy.
All right. I think of the three, I agree with you all and I disagree with you all. Of course, voting is necessary but not sufficient. You must vote if you expect anything to change, but you also must do more than voting. You need to contact your representatives. You need to organize. And what we mean by organizing is speaking to other people who are going to vote and finding out, what their positions are and organizing around their needs and building up communities and collective interests in improving your system. Make everything local. Really get out there and find these groups of synergy, groups that you're going to build a policy around. Get involved in party politics. I've been involved in both the Democratic and the DSA parties, as well as campaigning for many wonderful campaigns that are on my back wall. And it's never going to be enough to get our perfect world. But if you don't try, well, you've surrendered all of your agency. And if you do nothing but vote, I feel that you've pretty much surrendered your agency in that case to people who are engaged in the system and are speaking up on your behalf.
Okay, so with that, we're going to open the panel if anyone would like to respond.
Fabian, what do you think you can vote your way out of Jim Crow? Like voting was actually not allowed, depending if you were black or poor at one point in America.
Do I think you can vote your way out of Jim Crow? Probably not. Why? What's the? Can you examine why you're asking that question?
Yeah, your quote was, sort of a snappy thing. If voting actually did anything, it would be illegal. And of course, it was illegal at some point in our history.
I mean, that's a witty retort, I guess, against Emma Goldman. But that's not the point or the context of the quote. So
I think it's exactly the point in that we have to stretch outside simply voting and join others in direct action when it's appropriate. But I don't think that.
But we agree on
action,
that. Like that's the point.
Okay,
the point in context of what I'm saying is that, like, yes, you can use voting, right? But like voting by itself doesn't have any power.
Yeah.
Like they're like definitionally
well,
it can't have any power, right?
Yeah.
It's
with our organizing, we can make voting matter, and that's more to the point.
Yeah, I mean, like, it has to be backed up by the will of the people and to challenge the violence of the state, right? Ultimately, if the state is of the opinion that voting keeps you from fighting them, right, then they will give you whatever wedge issues you want whilst continuously gaining more power, as they've done since the founding of our nation. And they'll kind of just like let you have your paltry little victories, your little culture war victories. And meanwhile, they'll consolidate wealth at the top. They'll change the rules. They'll make it harder for you to do what it is that you want to do. They will take away liberty, right? And so voting in and of itself, that process, you're appealing to the authority that has the monopoly on violence and has the monopoly on the usage of that violence and is the judiciary of that violence, like, all together. So like ultimately voting definitionally, it can't be enough. It has to be activism. It has to be a change in culture and philosophy, and it has to be a change in the willingness to act in certain spaces or engage in agorism and things like that to exert your pressure on the system.
I think so. I don't think anybody disagrees. It's never just voting. But the question is if somebody says, like, if you go to the gym, will that help you get more muscle? I don't think anybody would say, like, no, it can't just be the gym. It also has to be like sleeping, and it also has to be eating. Like, well, yeah, of course. So if you want to be politically engaged, there are more steps to be politically engaged than just voting. But voting is arguably the most important part of that political process, because if the right people don't vote the right way, then nothing else matters. Like, it is the part where we plug in, like, quite literally to our institutions, aside from working for them. I mean, Jim Crow, as an example, was brought up, right? Like, Jim Crow was ended by voting. Yeah? Like, this...
I don't know that you can say Jim Crow was ended by voting.
Okay, hold on.
Jim Crow was also created by voting.
True. I'm sorry. Hold on. I phrased that as a question. Let me restate that. Jim Crow was ended by voting. It was challenged multiple times by the Supreme Court, right, in cases like Brown v. Board of Education. And the Civil Rights Act of '64 literally came from our Congress that we voted on. And this is how Jim Crow got eliminated in a lot of different states, right, in '64 and '65 following with the Voting Rights Act. So, yes, Jim Crow was gotten rid of via voting. Yeah?
You're doing a lot of work to say that the state went against other institutions of the state that were violating people's rights and then saying voting did this. It's like, maybe
every single one. Every
seven degrees of Kevin Bacon there.
Hold on, I don't want to make that a total libertarian debate, but you always do this thing where libertarians will post the state against the people, but you ignore the fact that there are times when the state acts on the will of the people, right? Like, the state doesn't just do things arbitrarily. The state is doing things.
Well, give me the example, because Jim Crow's a terrible example, because it's the state acting against the state that had already fucked over the people.
But the state didn't arbitrarily choose to fuck over the people with Jim Crow. That was the will of the people at one point in time, was to be able to discriminate against certain groups of people, right?
It wasn't the will of certain people.
No, but it was the will of enough of them to make it law, hence the voting part, right? Like,
right, which is why voting is in and of itself problematic, because it is conflict. There is no way.
Every type of engagement with the political system is going to be conflict. That's such a worthless statement. All engagement with politics.
No, it's not a worthless statement.
Can you give me one type of political activity that doesn't involve some type of conflict? All of them. All of it does.
Of course, almost all of the activities that are engaged in Cospaya, almost all of the activities are engaged in Tehran, Mexico, right?
Let's find a better statement, like the tyranny of the majority. You're a libertarian, you should be familiar with that one. So let's deploy it here and say, yes, sometimes voting is, 51% of people putting a tyrannical judgment on the minority, the 49%. So it's split 50-50. I want us to get to super democracy, where we have things like individual veto and local collective agreements that actually build up a just system based on sound principles, rather than, we like the rainbow flag today, we didn't like it yesterday.
But there's no way to ever make a system that's going to make every person happy, right? If you're having a society, you're necessarily going to have some people plugged into that society that aren't going to be happy with 100% of the decisions made.
And
right, but it's not about whether
is absolutely fine, right? That conflict between parties is absolutely okay, right? But I wanted
It's
to
not conflict. Unhappiness is not conflict.